The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and it must be Friday, and indeed it is. We're coming at you live from the Scottsdale Air Park Studios of Money Radio, 1510 AM, 105.3 FM, and the World Wide Web, moneyradio1510.com. If this is the first time you're tuning into our show is about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. How did they do that? They do that by listening right here. We've been on the air for over 9 years now, and what makes our show extraordinary is our guests, and today is no different. I have in the studio with me, I have got Chris Camacho. He is the president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, otherwise known as GPAC. And they are a regional economic organization, nonprofit, 501c3. Welcome to the studio, Chris.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I know your name. I've seen the articles that have been published in the Phoenix Business Journal and other media outlets, and it's really a pleasure to have you here because you have a very important role in the ecosystem of Phoenix as well as the greater Arizona market. So I would love for you to give our listeners just a little bit of background on you and what do you do?
Sure. You got it. So, almost 20 years working in economic development, which is really focused on economy building. At the end of the day, it's about creating future jobs, working with future industries, making sure that we have the right balance of labor force and infrastructure investments to meet the needs of a growing economy. And we're sitting here in the fastest growing market in the United States for the 5th year in a row. And
wow.
One we're very proud of. But beyond that is how do we ensure that really citizens across the entire gamut, whether you're a frontline dishwasher worker to a scientist, how do we ensure we have the jobs available so that people can continue to prosper, advance along the economic paradigm, so we all live in this great quality of life that we're all so fortunate to be in.
Wow, it's a big job, big role. You obviously came from another job, another role. Where did you come from?
So I'm originally a Midwestern guy, so I talk a lot about Midwestern work ethic and just drive, and I'm convinced in my 20 years of doing this that has led me to the spot I'm in today, which I feel very fortunate. Coming from the Midwest in the St. Louis area to Yuma, I took a stop in Yuma for 4 years, became their CEO when I was really young, and just an incredible opportunity to kind of reshape an agrarian economy, largely driven by military and ag,
right,
into a pretty pronounced position on manufacturing and customer service and customer success centers. And then in 2008, great timing to come to Phoenix, right? So we saw the economic collapse really riddled by over-leveraged debt and housing. And I feel like, you do these jobs because they're a bit of a calling. Mm-hmm. But what happened in 2008, 9, 10, 11 was we saw the perils of being so reliant on construction as our economic boon, and really set out a different course back in 2010 and 11 to ultimately to reap the rewards that we're yielding today, which is about manufacturing and exports and innovation and all these areas in healthcare and so many different disciplines. We're seeing success in high growth or high wage jobs today, and that's what this whole plan 10 years ago was all about.
Well, and I read a little bit about your bio. I mean, in the, let's call it 14 years since
Mm-hmm.
you've been here, you've attracted over 460 companies, created over 85,000 jobs, and $24 billion in capital investment. That's quite an accomplishment.
Well, those are the numbers on paper, but in reality, it really takes a community, a region to come together, and that's not only our communities, our cities, the city leadership, the county leadership. It takes university presidents, the community college alignment. There's so many pieces in corporates today that are trying to analyze where's the best place for me to produce my product or drive my service delivery model. And Phoenix as a metro market today is up amongst the many kind of leaders like Austin, like Nashville, Denver. We're now in the cut of the discussion for virtually every major U.S. investment. We're getting a look. I can tell you 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. So I think the next 10 years are just as bright as the 10 before us.
Couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned universities. So, you and I talked before the show, ASU, and just how much has changed in the 20 years since Dr. Crow has taken over that leadership. And I think ASU has been a big impetus for you to attract a lot of these businesses because they're graduating these students that are engineers and other degrees that really are able to satisfy their needs as it relates to workforce.
Yeah, my hat's off to Michael and what he's done with ASU. I can tell you when we travel around the world, which we do, we're in Taiwan with TSMC to companies out of Germany and the UK and elsewhere. The ASU brand is now known globally. And the engineering capacity, the business school, supply chain management expertise, a lot of core strengths come out of that university to meet the needs of these burgeoning sectors. At the same time, I look at what GCU's done since 2008, 40,000 students, really revitalizing the part of Phoenix that really needed it. Throw on top of that, I had a discussion with Bobby Robbins this week down at U of A and the incredible work he's doing in his short time at U of A. So all of these ingredients, the post-secondary system, including the community college network, so pivotal to the work that we do, because without a labor force, you don't have the ability to recruit these companies.
And you talk about U of A, right? You're part of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, but the fact is their med school's right here. And they've it's amazing what has happened in downtown Phoenix, because when I first came here 28 years ago, 5 o'clock rolled around and it was empty. And 5 o'clock rolls around now, and you go down to the center of Phoenix. It is busy. You've got over 10,000 students, I think, or more that are living there. You got classes. It is really bustling. Yeah,
whenever I talk to people, predominantly from back east, because I call it the East Coast bias. When they talk about Phoenix, they think of your granddad's Phoenix, and I talk about the downtown biomedical campus that's evolved, largely driven by the investment the city of Phoenix has made, but also the universities as well as the legislature with Proposition 301 20 years ago. That's really led to this massive downtown renaissance. And
right.
If you go down there, I mean, my office is right in the heart of Central and Washington. There's cranes everywhere. There's a tremendous amount of multifamily hotels, new restaurants. The local scene, the vibe down there is incredible. And I think we're just getting started with the biomedical capacity, and that'll tie ultimately into what the mayor and Chris Mackey talk a lot about is really the Medtown, this connection with Creighton University in North Central, along with BNI and Dignity, connected to downtown Phoenix. Pretty exciting what they're doing. And then you just go not far from here, which is what Mayo Clinic's doing with ASU. 20 years ago, we were not even in the conversation.
Not in it at
And
all.
today, we'll talk more about this BBBRC, but this Build Back Better money that's available from the federal government. Incredible spot for us to be in to advance our economy.
Well, you talked about leaders, and we talked about Michael Crow. Sharon Harper, Creighton University. She's been here on the show. She's a friend of mine. Amazing what she and her husband Ollie did to attract Creighton here. And I mean, Park Central Mall, I think it was one of the first malls here in the state of Arizona, and now it is a campus for Creighton University. Phenomenal.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned Sharon. I had a call with her on my way here today, and so we're talking about how do we take what's happened at Park Central, this revitalization project, and ultimately have this become the sub-market of interest for a lot of these healthcare innovation companies. And we have at Park Central the Wearable Technology Center. It's just getting legs where we have 3 different cohorts now, dozens of companies in innovation being spurred in that market, supported by the state legislature. So the state legislature allocated monies to help fuel these young innovative companies coming out of Barrows, coming out of Dignity, coming out of the region's healthcare system, to not only stimulate more intellectual property, but drive new inventions. Because that's one thing I've been very vocal about. I love going into California and selling Californians and coming here and bringing all the business here. But in the future economy, the capacity of our economy is going to be predicated on how we drive new companies that are built with Arizona-based intellectual property. And fortunately for us, we're seeing a lot of that being groomed here.
It is nothing short of amazing. It really is. And to think that a lot of this all started with TGen, right? TGen was like the first company or in that whole biomedical area that was really started over 20 years ago.
Yeah, I talked to Dr. Trent yesterday as well about this ARPA-H. We can come back and talk about this more, but ARPA-H is an incredible $1 billion opportunity out of the federal government. They're going to put this headquarters somewhere, and we're going to make a play for it.
Well, I want to talk about ARPA-H, but I also want to talk about this Buildback Better Regional Challenge. You kind of teased us with that, so I want to learn a little bit more about that. Chris Camacho is here in the studio. We're down one segment. We got 3 more to go. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. And if you're just tuning in, we're in our second segment here. I got Chris Camacho. He's the president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, otherwise known as GPAC. And if you missed our first segment, go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button. You'll find the radio shows right there below it. So, Chris, great first segment. I love what's happening here in our town, and GPAC is a big part of that in terms of attracting corporations and businesses, and obviously wealth to really fortify and help these businesses out. You mentioned a little bit about the Buildback Better Regional Challenge, and I really would like to better understand that. So tell me what that is all about, because I know about and I think most of our listeners know about the Buildback Better plan and what has happened with that. The first phase, the infrastructure, and then the second phase that really still has not been heard.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would say about the Build Back Better starting point was COVID unleashed this incredible appetite for collaboration and coordination, and it was naturally, unfortunately, a global pandemic that led us to the point where I'm having regular conversations with Peter Fine at Banner or the leadership at Honor Health or Dignity, et cetera, and over that time, we started looking at our delivery system of how we responded to COVID as a market response. We, the collective market, not GPEC, but the collective response. And what that enabled was, or what was birthed from that was the connectivity between the hospitals, the payers, the innovative companies like Heidi Janinga, for example, former founder of, or founder, I should say, of WebPT, and so many university collaborations that were pre-existing. All that came together at a time back in about 2018, 19 into 20 when we hit the strides of COVID. What that did was it organized the market, enabled us to go for the Build Back Better, which is not the one that's being debated in Congress today. It's the initial funding that came through the Economic Development Administration. So the money was there. It was a matter of markets competing with one another to put yourselves in a position to advance innovation and address a market need. So we looked at several different sectors, including semiconductors, which we can talk about, and many others, and we found that our coordination with health delivery and healthcare was one sorely needed in our market. You have a very bell-curved kind of population base where you have a lot of movement towards baby boomers to retirement, but a lot of young people as well, and a lot of indigent care as well. So all of those things being coupled together, there was about $100 million plan built that we submitted to the federal government, and of the 590 applicants, they've shortlisted 60 for the first phase. We were one of those 60 that were shortlisted and provided a $500,000 kind of jumpstart grant to organize the market. The second phase is the big one. The second phase, it'll be about $100 million provided to the market. And really, it's organized around several key themes. One, it's about advancing innovation. Two, it's about, in our world, creating a rapid prototyping center that in partnership with ASU and Mayo Clinic and many others that would enable this region to create prototypes of new med devices, new tools that would help within the realm of care delivery. Three, a focus of digital health and digital care. So, in the advent, you probably went through this on your mobile phone during COVID. You can, actually get healthcare treatment through digital tools, but also with a tremendous amount of geriatric care in our community. We wanted to find ways that, COVID-induced ways that we could provide support in monitoring systems and even creating new inventions around monitoring that would further our market position. So, and then incubation strategies and even healthcare strategy, workforce strategies as well. So making sure we have a next generation prepared workforce. those are the 5 kind of key facets to what this broad-based plan does. Now, what the federal government dollars do is they provide the carrot to ensure that the market gets hyper-organized in the delivery of care. So, in that case, we had over 25 different organizations that came together that said, we want to raise our hand and participate across that entire spectrum of the ecosystem delivery. And so we're excited to play a role of being that convener. And what that also has stair-stepped us to is there's an economic engines effort through the National Science Foundation that's coming up that we'll also be vying for as well, that we'll find out in that case later this fall whether we're successful. So GPEC's never been big into federal grants. They're usually mired with a lot of bureaucracy. But what I do appreciate in the help we receive from Senator Sinema and Kelly in this case is they've been at the ready to help us. And we were talking about Senator McCain and even Senator Flake before. The tremendous amount of assistance that we've received from our Senate delegation has been incredible. And so I'm excited to work at that level to try to do great things for our community, and this is just one example.
100 million. That's a lot of money. It really is. And you talk about collaboration, and obviously, near and dear to us and our show and our programming is healthcare. And, a number of the people you mentioned have been here on the show. And I will tell you, I served 10 years on the Banner Health Alzheimer's Foundation Board. And that's how I got to know Sharon. And, you talk about collaboration, and I'm sure you may have met along the way Dr. Eric Ryman, who runs that. I mean, we have the Arizona Alzheimer's Consortium where, it is open book for, like the Mayo Clinic and Barrow and ASU and Banner. I mean, we're all working in this together, and I love that. I love the fact that everyone is, no one's siloed here, right? They're all working together, and I think that is a big part of the success that we've had here, right?
Yeah, one thing I'd say about Metro Phoenix and the state of Arizona in full is that this is a true meritocracy. Unlike other places where I've been or I've seen leadership like for what I do in my day job, most systems are closed systems, meaning it's hard to be new and break into the mold. Here, most people, 70% of the adult population's from elsewhere, you and I included. And as we've come to market, we've found ways to plug in, support the greater good, the greater cause. And there's such this level of, we're almost like Senator McCain's maverick attitude, where we're like, no one's going to tell us what to do, but together we're stronger. We even have a tagline that's Greater Phoenix Together, because that's truly what we believe differentiates us. And I can tell you the probably too many stories you want to hear, but when we're competing with a Dallas or competing with a Chicago, for a company making a decision, and they go tour those markets, every time I hear the feedback, it's amazing how organized this market is. The public, the private, the political sector, people care and they want to be helpful. And that, Governor Ducey is a great testament to how many times I've called him at the 11th hour to be helpful. He answers the phone 100% of the time. Those are the kind of public-private alignments that we're going to need going forward, because it's incredibly competitive, and it's not just national, it's international now. We're on an international plane for semiconductors where companies are deciding, should I go to Arizona, should I go to Texas, New York, or should I go to Malaysia, Philippines, South Korea? That's the world we live in today.
If you look at the demographics that are coming here to our community today versus 20 years ago, I would say probably the average age 20 years ago was probably 60 years old. And today is what, maybe 25, 30, 35?
You're pointing to something that I have to address constantly is if you're on the East Coast, you're from a foreign market, when you hear Arizona, you generally think Grand Canyon or a great place to retire. That's the historical brand of Arizona. What's shifted, however, is the newness, the youth movement that's happened here. So a lot of the graduates from ASU, for example, 71% of them stay in market for their first 5 years. 71%, really high percentage, very sticky market. On the demographic shift that you referenced, today what we're seeing is instead of being that retirement movement you might have seen from Canada or from California and elsewhere, the 25 to 44-year-old, the working class, is our highest demographic shift by percentage of any other demographic. So the fact we're getting younger and we're getting more of the educated shift that historically had maybe gone to Denver or Austin or Dallas, they're coming to Phoenix because of lifestyle access and all the recreational amenities and certainly the jobs market.
Yeah, and it's a great topic to really conclude our second segment, our first half, and it's really talking about workforce and it's talking about jobs markets. I'm in the healthcare field and you are in a way because that's part of, the allure and attraction to GPAC to really, stimulate our economy. Workforce is a huge issue, and it's a big issue for in-home care providers like us because we have an aging society. Matter of fact, in Arizona by 2030, we're going to have more people 65 and older than we are going to have 17 and younger, and we're probably about 5 years ahead of most states as it relates to aging. So we got a real conundrum ahead of us, and it's like, okay, how do we prepare for this need that is just before us, right? 85-year-olds today by 2050, and that seemed like a long time ago, a long time into the future, but it's only 26 years into the future. 85-year-olds is going to quadruple to 21 million. That is just a startling number. So how do we get more people here? How do we get more workers here to really get into the healthcare profession? And I'm just talking about caregiving, right? But, how about nurses, therapists, doctors? I know this from Banner back when COVID was really running rampant. They had beds. They just didn't have workers, and they had to turn people away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the number of, to your last point, the number of CEOs that I talked to at the height of the pandemic, the traveling infrastructure, traveling nurses, across the board. One, it was competitive, but two, we're competing with everyone nationally in that same domain. Going forward, though, I think there's going to have to be a national focus on workforce delivery. We're not meeting the needs of tomorrow's industry, so we'll spend a lot of time, working on that going forward. We can talk about that in the next
We'll
segment.
talk a little bit more in the second half. It's halftime here at Health Futures. I got Chris Camacho here in the studio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. And if you're just tuning in, I got Chris Camacho here in the studio. He's the president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, otherwise known as GPAC. And if you missed the first two segments, go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button. Right below it, you'll find radio show, you'll find this show, and you'll find about 400 or 500 others. So, Chris, we've talked about a lot of different things, and I really appeal to our listeners. If you missed it, please catch it, because we talked about where, GPAC has really sat in our growth here in Phoenix. And for anyone that's lived here for the last 20 years, the imprint that you have put on our local economy and our local community is really immeasurable. It's amazing what has happened here. And I talked about the 460 companies, and I talked about the $24 billion, and I know that isn't just GPAC, but you guys are the quarterback. You guys are the ones that attract and bring people together, right? And that was one of the things that you really talked about, was everything we do is so collaborative here. There's no silos. We work together.
Yeah, if you look at, I answered this question with Bloomberg the other day, that what's so different from 10 years ago about Phoenix? So one, if you look at the composition of industry 10 years ago, you'd see a lot of customer service, you'd see a lot of warehousing, logistics, you had some some healthcare, but notably it was a mid-tier economy when you looked at GDP, gross domestic product position. In the last decade, we've seen an emphatic change in our GDP position, tremendous amount of shift in per capita income levels. So, people here are making more money, but the industry diversity has shifted. So you're seeing more manufacturing jobs today than construction jobs. You're seeing much more semiconductor activity than we've ever seen before, as we talked about. But there has been a marked change in even healthcare. When you think about healthcare of a decade ago, we had tremendous amount of patient care assets. You had universities that were really beginning, and you mentioned TGen, genomics. We were advancing a lot of these areas in neuroscience and CNS and cardiovascular. But today, we are now along the West Coast. We have some preeminent assets that people come here to take advantage of the criticality of capability that we have. And so, again, the economy has shifted, but it does take the entirety of the community. And I always tell people that you can't do this without leadership in the governor's office. You can't do this without mayors working together with county supervisors, with the private sector, with the academic institutions, and the entrepreneurial segment. If you have any one of those segments out of balance, you don't move at the pace we are. And so that's what's gratifying for me is I get to sit at the helm of this. And really, as you can probably tell by my personality, I like to run hard. You mentioned lacrosse. I'm a former soccer guy that played in college. And it's almost like athletics where you're constantly team building, but you're also expecting excellence and you expect to win. And that's part of the cloth we're cut from.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, I always use the athletic metaphor. I mean, working on a team is really something that crosses over into the work that we do, and that's what you're doing. I mean, you are working on a team, and you've got a team of whether it be politicians, whether it be community leaders or corporate leaders that you're bringing together, and you are, as I shared, you're the quarterback and making all that happen. And nothing short of phenomenal, the stuff that has happened in the last 20 years. And if I go back to 30 years, I mean, if you needed cancer treatment here in this town, you went down to Tucson because there weren't cancer places to go to. And now you have a whole host of places to go if you needed cancer treatments. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a statement of what's happened here in our community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would say this, that I look on the horizon for this region, and we're not without our challenges, how we secure our water future, how we deal with load growth with our energy grid. But as it relates to healthcare, pinpointing, a South Phoenix area that has some healthcare access challenges. And I've worked with Equality Health and many other groups that are looking at, how do you implement everything from food security to healthcare access on a regular basis to diagnostic and preventive medicine work. To me, it's like we have to figure out that rubric as well, because in our world, it used to be, 10, 15 years ago, all about the math. Company's going to come here based upon the tax liability, the cost of doing business. But today, there's this focus on a societal outcome. How are we as collective leaders advancing a civics platform that addresses advancing and enabling prosperity for all of our citizens, not just the jobs of tomorrow? And so to me, I feel like we're shouldering that responsibility too,
Sure.
where you can no longer turn a blind eye to just say, well, as long as we keep driving companies, that's enough. I look at it as a responsibility that we have to dive into some of the hardest, most challenging issues and create leadership structures around them. And so we're leaning into a lot of that work going forward, and that's the next chapter of GPEC's work.
And I'm so glad you're talking about that, because in healthcare we talk about the social determinants of health, right? And there are so many of those that exist right here in our community. You talk about South Phoenix, and if you even look at the average age of somebody living in, whether it be up here in Scottsdale or Glendale versus down in the inner city, it's incredible how different it is. I mean, you may see a disparity as much as 10 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is because of these insecurities that are existing, whether it be healthcare insecurities or food insecurities, and we've got to solve for that.
Yeah, one of the things that's probably 5 years ago that Hugh Lytle and Tomas Leon brought to bear with Equality Health. There was a roundtable that looked at, it was a social determinants of health. It was personalized medicine delivery conversation, but it looked at the disparity of the 85258 zip code versus the 85004 in life expectancy. It was 14-year difference.
It was 14.
14.
I said 10, but
in the
14.
Same, yeah,
wow.
In the same region, you have that disparity. So I started, decoupling. Again, I'm a data guy, so I can't help shake that, that life or that background, and started looking at all of these factions of, are we advancing the economy in a way that's truly going to benefit all Arizonans or all, folks in Metro Phoenix? And to me, it was illuminating that while we've had such tremendous success of recruiting new companies, growing new cultivated enterprises, that's not enough to build a well-rounded economy that's going to be accessible to all. There's strategies that we're going to have to deploy in the next chapter of our work that really hit on these kind of points. And it's about career and technical education. It's about STEM. One of the things that Michael Crow, you mentioned earlier, and I talk about is the future jobs of 20 years from now. There's no degree programs for them
exactly
yet, and at the same time, we know that STEM is going to be, those jobs are going to be in demand 2 to 3x your other standard job in the economy. So, we're talking about how to advise our children in the future. We have these conversations around our kitchen table, is how do we ensure that we're preparing this next generation student base for the jobs of tomorrow? It's not like what it was 20 years ago. And so to me, it's like we need to ensure that we're creating awareness around these jobs of the future. There's going to be a tremendous amount of digital, whether it's affecting healthcare, it's going to affect the transmission of data, it's going to affect security of data, and all of these what we call futurist jobs today. Web3, people are talking a little bit about Web3 today, and most people are enamored with NFTs and crypto. That industry is in the first inning.
Right.
And so to me, these are all areas that in my job I have to pay attention to these trends, the emerging markets, what's happening globally, so I can position Greater Phoenix to take advantage of those opportunities.
No doubt, no doubt. And I want to talk a little bit about healthcare, and certainly, we talked about the social determinants of health, and one of the biggest challenges that we're dealing with, and Cypress is one of many that are providers of all tech services, and specifically home and community-based service work. And the biggest challenge we're running into is wages. And, wages are going up, and the cost of, employing people has gone up, but the reimbursements that we're getting from the state government is really low, and it's really hard to be able to keep up with that. You hear the music, it's hard to believe it. I wanted to get into this discussion, but we'll pick it up on the fourth segment, and it is our last segment. But I want to talk a little bit about workforce and how do we provide care to the people that are experiencing social determinants of health, as well as food insecurities and other insecurities.
It's going to be a big deal for all of us. We'll talk about
you
that
bet.
next. Absolutely.
You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. I got Chris Camacho here in the studio. He's the president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, otherwise known as GPAC. Stick around. We got one last segment. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. Thank you, James. A little Marshall Tucker band taking us into our last segment. If you're just tuning in, Chris Camacho here is in the studio with me. He's the president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, otherwise known as GPAC. And if you just tuning in right now, you got to go out to our website to catch those first three segments at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button. Right below it is radio show. So I teed up this segment to really talk a little bit about, our workforce, and certainly, Medicaid. And Medicaid in our state is known as Access, or All-Tax Arizona Long-Term Care Services. And, the biggest challenge we have right now is, the cost of labor has just gone through the roof. And anyone that is a provider of any services or even goods is having to employ these people. And, we're dealing with an inflation factor of about 9%. And the biggest challenge that we have is the state government doesn't have this, pot full of money. Although I know that, Governor Ducey has been able to get reserves. I mean, he's got, a big reserve pool. But we have a lot of older adults that have been authorized hours through Access and through their managed care organizations that are not getting it because providers like me can't hire people. That is a huge conundrum. I'm not here to have you solve for that, but I would imagine we're not the only ones. I mean, we're all dealing with workforce challenges, and I'm just curious to what GPAC is doing to really help solve for that.
Yeah, that's certainly not an easy one to solve without a lot of thought and leadership. And what I can tell you about workforce across the country is the United States is in a severe shortage or mismatch of skills against job demands. And at the same time, you have inflation, which was said to be transitory. It's obviously not been as such. And so we're sitting here today, and unfortunately, Phoenix as a market has the highest inflation numbers of anywhere in the country. Now, there's a lot of arguments around what's driving that, but as it relates to this topic, I mean, there's a lot of, when I think about like what this administration has done coming in from with $1 billion deficit to the significance of resources we're sitting on today, some of that's been federal government driven with the resources provided to the state. But my point of this is I think we have to continue to have policies in place that grow the economy. So we maintain pro-business that enables us to collect new revenue. That new revenue, we can evaluate whether we cut taxes, reform taxes, or provide dollars into these programs. And as you talked about our demographic shift, while we do have a lot of young people moving here, we still have a lot of care needed for our adult population. So, these are kind of things that, again, GPAC looks at it from a true empirical evidence standpoint. Fortunately for us as a C3, we don't get involved in political races. We don't get involved in politics. Yeah. We deal with the byproduct of it. But At the end of the day, we try to bring a sound economic voice to a lot of these conversations. So I often get calls from, the senators or the House members that say, Chris, I'm looking at this kind of bill. What do you think this would do economically? So to fund, maybe it's more reimbursement, maybe it's a different kind of funding strategy, and we look at the economics of what may occur going forward. So those are things I think we'll play a more influential role in going forward.
You mentioned Hugh Lytle, and I know Hugh and his dad Ben and his brother Larry, and Equality Health has really shined a big light on the social determinants of health, and certainly we've got a lot of work to do. We've got to raise everybody up and really provide them the necessary services that they can live the best life that they can. Certainly 14 years disparity between those two zip codes is not good.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of work left to do.
Well,
sure.
I look at it the same way as education support, and we have a lot of debate and political arguments around education funding and so forth. And I'm not here to talk too deeply about that, but what I am here to say is some similar disparities exist in terms of the infrastructure, the resources for low-income kids in our state.
Right.
And I think we're on the cusp of what I believe is this education innovation advancement in our country, because I think that's going to be needed. But even in our state, which is a much more open regulatory framework, I would hope that our next governor, whom I've met with the top candidates remaining, that we'll see novel innovation to support all kids, because we do have some shining light examples of great education delivery systems, and we have those that are left behind. And so one thing about GPEC I'm very prideful of is we don't shy away from the discourse needed to have a debate and dialogue.
Yeah.
We try to bring a true empirically evidenced view of what's going on. And the good news is we're in a lot better spot than most places across the country, but I don't want people to get comfortable or complacent that, with our economic success, I don't want to overshadow the needs. And
Right.
so I feel like that's a responsibility of economic groups like ours.
Absolutely. Look, Chris, it's been great meeting you and getting a chance to know you better. Like I said, I knew about you, and I've read a lot of the stuff that's been written by you or about you and some of the work that GPEC is doing. But I want to make sure that, I leave, with our interview here today. Is there a question I haven't asked, or is there something that you want to share with our listeners that you think that they really should know about GPEC and the work that you're doing here in our community?
Well, we're fortunate that over the last 14 years as an organization, we have 22 of these communities that partner together. That's a rare occurrence across the country. So City of Phoenix being the largest city, the county obviously, and then the 20 other cities in this region. And that's coupled with 200 private sector companies. And so when I travel across the country and around the world, you don't find an organization that has come together where you truly have the public and private, nonpartisan mindset of advancing the economy. That kind of latitude given to, certainly myself, but our entire team at GPEC affords us the ability to go not only dream for the community, but put practical strategies in place for us to advance healthcare, advance the semiconductor sector, which, was fruitful, but not near the level it is today, in all these burgeoning industries. And so the one I would just ask the listeners, on the business side, get involved. Get involved at the hyper-local level with your councils. Get involved, with your chambers and economic development organizations like ours, because we're in a special spot as a regional economy, and we're very young. And with youth comes some undiscipline.
Sure.
But it also drives some pretty unique opportunities to shape and frame and advance our future. And if you want to dream like that with us, that's what we're all about. So we're excited to be here today, and thank you for the opportunity to join you.
Well, it's having a seat at the table, right? The old adage, if you don't have a seat at the table, you might find yourself on the menu. So,
That's right.
I mean, you need to really step up and really participate. I do want to end really talking about the bumps that we get in terms of the economy. We have a Super Bowl that's coming up. We have the Phoenix Open or Waste Management Open every single year. I'm assuming that you do have at least a part in that, and certainly those events really help stimulate our economy. It brings a lot of dollars here, and it also brings a lot of visitors here, and it brings hopefully a lot more people coming to Arizona.
Yeah, we'll end on a positive segment because the Super Bowl drives about $700 million of economic value and $300 million more dollars of direct monies coming into our state.
Wow.
When that happens. So our last one in 2015, big deal for our community, 60,000 people coming to the market. So it creates a lot of visibility for our brand, very positive, images. And, for us, we host a CEO program along with the host committee, and we support the Arizona Commerce Authority, who are the primary hosts. So we get to bring, executives from around the world to Greater Phoenix and Arizona to see it, touch it, feel it. But the Open is another one. I serve as a Thunderbird, where we host the Open every year, and
yeah, you do.
$80+ million being raised, for that event, and tens of millions of dollars going back into the community. And we're all prideful because that's a side gig that we volunteer for. A lot of money going back in the community, and that's really what it's all about.
Well, the Thunderbirds, they do so much, and that is their marquee event. And this past year, you probably have the numbers readily available. How much money did you guys put back into the community?
So the last few years, I think the number is going to be announced soon, but it'll be a double-digit millions of committed dollars to the community. And this is Special Olympics, it's YMCA's, and it's youth sports. And I was fortunate enough to serve as a foundation chair this last year, so you get to see where the money goes. And it gives you chills thinking about how a golf tournament is now at the scale supported by corporate dollars of how we can affect our community, and I'm prideful to be a small part of it.
I've been here 28 years. I've been to 27 of them. I missed the one that COVID happened, and we all missed it. It's one of those things. Hopefully we won't ever have that happen again. Chris Camacho, thank you so much for joining me here at Health Futures. Make it a great day. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back next Friday.
Thank you very much.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress Home Care Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.